I'm Cormac Kelly. I'm the moderator and webinar for the National Orthopaedic Alliance webinars. And welcome again to our lunchtime webinar. I think it's number 35, I think. I'm not sure, but anyway, lots of them we've done. But today we're concentrating on quite an important aspect of our care, which is sustainability and our green plans in orthopaedic surgery. And we have a fabulous panel with opinions across the board from SWLEOC down south and from Oswestry, my hospital in the Midlands. And also we have some information on some research that's going on at the moment and an invitation to join. Next slide, please. So just reminding everybody that our webinar is being recorded. All participants are mute. You can post questions at any time during the meeting. So use the chat function to message the coordinator if you have any issues or you want to share anything. But if you want to post a question, use the questions tab, which is up there somewhere on the top right, I believe. Next slide, please. Yeah, so this is what precipitated this. So there's a lot of distractions at the moment, but I was interested to find out, first of all, that trusts were required to do their carbon footprint, but also worrying that many trusts have not done this, or if it has been done, it's not comprehensive. Next slide. So yeah, our biggest challenge at the moment is global warming, and not the health or the orthopedic health of the community, but really the health of our earth. And it sort of links into what's happening locally, nationally, and internationally. And there's a lot of distractions out there, especially wars and the economic challenges. And locally as well, the feeling is that we need to refocus our efforts on what we're doing. And hopefully this webinar might stimulate a little bit of refocus as to where we're going with our sustainability plan. Next slide. So we've got an excellent panel. We're going to kick off with Irrum shortly. He's going to give us an introduction to orthopedics and sustainability, and then local progress at SWLEOC. And then Sean and Phil are going to tell us what's happening in the Robert Jones and Agnes Hunt, and then Virginia Lida comes up. Virginia works with the National Institute of Health Research and based at the University of Birmingham. She's going to tell us all about the Dragon study. We'll see questions coming through, and then we should be out of here pretty sharply, I would expect, at 2 o'clock today. Next slide, please. So I think at this stage, yeah, I'll just switch over Claire, and we go straight to Irrum. I'd like to welcome Irrum to give her presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly, for the introduction. Sadaf, are you able to share my slide?
Yep.
So I'm going to talk about sustainability in orthopaedic surgery, and I'm from the South West London Elective Orthopaedic Centre, which is in South West London, and it's a 4-partnership hospital between Epsom St Helier, Kingston Hospital, Croydon and St George's Hospital. The next slide, please. So climate change poses one of the largest health emergencies to human mankind, which impacts health in lots of different forms of global warming, collapse of the Gulf Stream, extreme weather changes, environmental disasters, altered infectious disease panels. And the World Health Organization has predicted an excess in mortality of over 250,000 fertilities per year as a consequence of climate change. So it's a problem. Next slide, please. So, and if you just click next. So there's a problem within the NHS. The NHS is the largest single contributor to greenhouse gas greenhouse gas emissions in the public sector. It's the largest publicly funded health system in the world, and every year the NHS delivers nearly 17 million inpatient admissions from more than 200 hospital trusts, and it has a large carbon annual footprint of 24.9 million tonnes. The carbon footprint of an operating department within a large UK hospital is estimated at 5,000 tonnes per year, and a single operation has a carbon emission of 150 to 250 kilograms. So there's a significant challenge ahead of us to enable surgery to meet the net zero carbon by 2045, and that's in line with the NHS green strategy. So change is needed. Next slide, please. So like I said, the NHS accounts for a huge amount of the carbon footprint. It's 4.6% of the UK's total carbon footprint, and operating theatres tend to produce a lot of waste. Of 50 to 70% of the total hospital waste is from an operating theatre. Next slide, please. So there's a need for change. So what is sustainability? So change is needed, and how do we do it? And by implementing sustainability is a current buzzword. It's being used more and more. Sustainability is more than just recycling. The Academy of the Medical Royal College, Royal Colleges define sustainability in accordance to a triple bottom line framework, compromising of environmental, which is protecting nature, reducing pollution; economical, which is the financial, reducing consumption; but then also the social domains, which is having, treating everybody equally, treating employees equally, ensuring equity amongst the population. Next slide, please. So a sustainable healthcare system involves ensuring the ability of good quality care for future generations by balancing all those factors that I just said, by balancing the economic, environmental and social constraints and demands within the healthcare setting. A sustainable healthcare system maintains population health, reduces disease burden and minimises the use of healthcare. Next slide, please. So those are the three domains, what I've just been mentioned, and these need to be improved. So to improve, next slide, please. So to improve sustainability and provide strategic direction is what's needed, and there's a need for having leadership in this, in all the different aspects, in the financial, in the environmental, in the social sustainability, and promote efficient and cost-effective use of healthcare resources while reducing variability and improving patient outcomes. So this was our goal, our purpose at SWLEOC, was when we set out to start when we implemented sustainability in orthopaedic surgery. These were our overall purposes. Our overall objectives were to reduce, reuse and recycle to lessen the environmental impact of surgery. And this was all in line with meeting the net zero by carbon by 2045, but also just being mindful of protecting the planet. Next slide, please. So what can we do? So what can we do? So at SWLEOC, we embedded sustainability into our governance structure. So now it's part of our clinical governance. We adhere to greener initiatives, and what can we do locally, or what can other trusts do, is to become advocates of greener purchasing by switching to more energy efficient, safer, cleaner, recyclable, reusable products, to guide and also to educate and empower healthcare staff about sustainability and to advocate for research. So these are all things that are needed to be done in order for you to have a sustainable workforce, but also to have sustainability implemented within your day-to-day working. Next slide, please. So what did we do? So in May 2021, Professor Kader, the Director of Research and the immediate past President of BOSTA, introduced sustainability as a pillar of the clinical governance framework. Him alongside Mr Vipin Asopa have been the driving force behind sustainability at SWLEOC, and they've implemented different pathways and we started off by doing audits, which I'll talk about just later in the presentation. And we had, so next slide, please. So we did these audits, but what we did was we put together a core group of people who came together weekly to meet, to understand sustainability, to then go and feed back to their departments what sustainability was, is, and how each member of the team can be involved. And it was about individuals taking ownership, individuals taking leadership on sustainability. So every department would then feed back into our weekly meeting on the progress they were making. And it was as little as things of, stop using plastic cups and bringing in your own mugs. So these were just some audits that we undertook, and I'm going to talk through some of these more specific audits. So next slide, please. So prior to doing these audits, we implemented the rethink, reduce, reuse, repair, revamp, repurpose, refuse, and recycle and research. So these are our SWLEOC's core 8 R's that we adhere to, not only for sustainability, but in generally. These are our greener initiatives, and when we're doing work, we try to make sure that we adhere to all 8 of these. Next slide, please. So the key 3 areas that we audited when we first started was water use, waste management, the flow of equipment and devices, and our junior research fellows, they undertook these audits. So I'm going to just share a bit of their work now. So next slide, please. So water use. So water use, what we wanted to do is we wanted to quantify the water wastage that was being done at SWLEOC. So we had 12 theatres. So 12 theatres were observed over 1 week. Timings were measured from a stopwatch and theatre clocks, and data was analysed. Next slide, please. So 12 operations were reviewed. There were all different members of staff, so it wasn't just one group. So we had the surgeons, we had the assistants, and the flow rate was measured at 0.1 litres per second. So each tap runs for 30 seconds at a time, and 3 litres were produced per 30 seconds. So that was 6 operating theatres. That was 17 taps in total. 17 of those taps were noted to have a switch on sensor, and 12 had them with a switch off sensor too. And we also noted that 2 taps were leaking. Next slide, please. So the results were, so the time to scrub was, the average time was 128 seconds. The water running for that time was 72 seconds, and the time scrubbing underwater was 24 seconds, and the time water running but not used was 48 seconds. So that led to water not being used for 4.8 litres of water was not being used when scrubbing. So it was really important for us to address this, to for people to be aware, to make sure that those sensors that we had in place were being used. Is the most appropriate time? Is 30 seconds enough? Should it be more? Should it be less? So this was a real eye-opener just to see how much water was being wasted when scrubbing. And scrubbing is a fundamental aspect of surgery. Every hospital is using it. It needs to be done. So it was really important for staff members to be made aware that where tap can be switched off, the tap should be switched off. Next slide, please. And then we had a look at another aspect. We looked at tourniquets. So we observed the tourniquet usage within our procedures. So we looked at various different arthroplasty procedures, but also foot and ankle procedures and arthroscopies where they're used, and how much and their usage. And this was conducted by our research fellows over a period of three weeks. Next slide, please. And at the time, we were only using single-use disposable tourniquets, and of them, 32 cases of the 41 cases that we observed were used disposable tourniquets, and all tourniquets were disposed of, and they were binned after they've been used. Next slide, please. And what we noticed, we did some analysis. So we used our single-use tourniquets, which were in place. So one tourniquet, the cost of one packet was £13. So that was that. And then if you look at a box of 10, that's £136.50. One operation, £13.65. But if you have a reusable tourniquet, you have they can be used for either 40 operations or for a 6-month usage, and one tourniquet is cost £24.38, which is slightly more than the single-use one. But when you divide that by the number of operations it can be used for, the time frame it can be used for, the total cost for one operation is only 61 pence. So there was also the financial aspect that with the use of tourniquets. So next slide, please. So our next steps were to, start reuse the single-use tourniquets and introduce the reusable tourniquets and have the correct disposable tourniquets to make sure that they're being disposed of in the correct bins. And I'm going to go on to talk about the waste segregation in the next set of slides. So if I could have the next slide, please. So waste segregation, this is really important. We observed 6 cases over a course of 2 days, and we observed where the packaging was going and what bins this was going into. So next slide, please. And bins in theatre, so many of you will be aware that there's the different types of bins in theatre, and different waste goes into different bins. But is everyone aware what you should put in each bin? Do people actually adhere to putting the correct waste into the correct bin? We looked at this. So next slide, please. So 6 cases were observed and 166 consumables were counted, and a staggering 20% was incorrectly segregated into the correct bins. And the variability, of these going into different bins was amazing. So if you go into the next slide, you'll see that. Next slide, please. So this just shows, the number. It's a busy slide, but it's showing the number that were put into the correct bin and the observed bin, and which bin they were going into and which bin they should have gone into. Next slide, please. So what we had to do was we then identified that there was obviously a problem with 20% going into the incorrect bins. Posters were used to classify waste, and they were implemented in theatres. And this was to, the implementation of having the appropriate bins in theatre and switching to reusable items where possible, and updating the surgeon's preference cards as well. So, and also just educating people, making people aware, having these posters, ensuring that they're aware. If there's any questions, answering the staff members' questions, giving reassurance that, and giving reassurance to staff. So we also engaged with our waste management teams. We had them come in and talk to our staff members. They came and did a group workshop to the theatre staff. So theatre staff were then a bit more clearer in terms of what disposable, what consumables go into each bin. Next slide, please. So that's talking about some of the work that's been done at SWLEOC, but also I'm going to talk just a little bit about social sustainability. So social sustainability is an equally important part of sustainability, and it's in the healthcare setting. Social sustainability relates to the ability for hospitals and healthcare systems to enhance not only the quality of life of patients, but also the quality of life of their employees, and improve the well-being of population, but looking after their staff too. And the hierarchy of needs, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, states that the 5 categories, so that you need to meet the needs of the physiological needs first, then safety, then belonging. So you need to meet the hierarchy. So, but the fundamental needs need to be met first. And sustainability in the workforce, involves prioritising employees' well-being, fostering diversity and inclusion, and diversity and inclusion is a big thing at the moment, but it's also making sure that that's, we're adhering to that and implementing that in social sustainability, supporting professional development, embracing workplace flexibility, and promoting leadership and having people be responsible, giving ownership to people. So one of the things that we did, we invited every staff member to the sustainability meetings that were led by Professor Kader. Each team member, each lead was invited. Each lead then went back to their teams, asked their teams to come up with ideas. So it was really involving everyone. It wasn't just from management. It was from everyone. Everybody was involved, and that's where change is made. Next slide, please. No, next slide. I'm just sort of recapping over. So next slide. Next slide. So what's happening with sustainability? So the BOA have sustainability aims, BOTA have sustainability aims, and the Sustainability in Surgery strategy was launched in April 2021. So there's lots going on around sustainability, not only on a local level, but sort of nationally as well, with all the Royal Colleges, and with the various different associations too. Next slide, please. And this is just an example of what the Royal College of Surgeons says. They've initiated their checklist for theatres, so it's something that trusts should put into place if they haven't already. Have these green theatre initiatives in place where they can go through, and it's a really good checklist actually. If you haven't already seen it, I'd highly recommend you to go and have a look at it and see if you can implement it into your trusts. Next slide, please. So what's needed? So change is needed. So one of the most important things of the way we got sustainability implemented in our hospital was with the drive of our director of research, Professor Kader. He was very, he had a goal. He wanted to implement it as a pillar within our clinical governance, and our medical director, Mr Patel, and our managing director, Mary Richardson, were both very receptive to this. They understood this. They implemented it into our framework. It's now part of our framework. So there was the urgency was recognised. We established the need for change. There was a strong group of people. So there was a strong coalition to lead the change. There was a clear vision. There was strategy. There was engagement of employees. There was obstacles, but obstacles were removed along the way. And we celebrated our wins in terms of where we identified that there was a problem. We implemented change. Change was then we identified them. Our fellows were acknowledged, and all the various different members. And it's been a collaborative team effort, and it's something that's continually ongoing. Next slide, please. So we implemented these 8 Rs, and we highly recommend that these are replicated and reused in other trusts. So if you would like this slide, please feel free to use it within your hospitals, your organisations. Next slide, please. And it's ultimately about working collaboratively together for the NHS to be the world's first national healthcare system to meet net zero. Next slide, please. And I'd just like to acknowledge all my colleagues for all their support. Thank you very much. Thank you. Next slide, please. And these are again acknowledgements and thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Irrum. Really nice presentation. Thank you very much. Interesting to see what you're doing with locally as well. So what we'll do is we'll go straight to Sean and Phil. So Oswestry won the Sustainability Award in 2022 at the National Orthopaedic Alliance presentations, and we're very proud of that. I was just wondering in my head, well, what have we done with all that? Are we still progressing? What are our new goals? What are the barriers to moving forward? So I've asked Sean and Phil to talk about this. So thank you for that. And I'll switch straight across, I think, to Sean starting off, I think.
Yes, thank you very much. And first of all, thank you very much for inviting us to speak today. I think Phil and I have both found that it's been a really great opportunity for us to review our sustainability journey here at RJH. We're nearing the end of our current green plan and looking on to the next chapter. So it does feel like, from a timing point of view, it's really come a great opportunity for us. Onto the first slide, Phil. So we just wanted to start with some context for today's discussion, noting that sustainability is such a broad subject, but the brief for us here is quite clear: net carbon zero by 2040, and we do need to be mindful that there are reduction targets set along the way. So whilst 2040 feels quite a way away, actually there are some targets sooner than that we need to be mindful of, in line with NHS England's Green Plan. We'll focus initially on energy as the Trust's largest contributor, but we've also taken the opportunity to highlight some of the successes and some of the challenges that we've faced alongside our Green Plan journey, alongside finishing up with some ambitions in the hopefully not too distant future. So before I hand over to Phil to go into a bit more depth around our energy, I just wanted to set the scene in regards to the scale of the specific ask at RJAH. On the left, you can see our carbon footprint press. And on the right, you can see the Trust's direct carbon footprint. This is where we're going to be focusing our thoughts today. We're currently sitting at 6,600 tonnes of carbon dioxide equivalent. These are published on NHS England's Green Plan support tool, so they aren't something that we're keeping in-house in the Trust. They are publicly available, and hence why we're starting our discussions today around energy, as you can see quite clearly, our biggest contributor. So I will hand over to Phil to take you through energy.
Thank you, Sharon. As Sharon said, this is available on the Green Plan support tool, which every trust can sign up to. It's a benchmark taken in 2019-2020, and we're aware that it's due to be updated soon. So the data is gathered from many national submissions that are already being carried out, so it's not something that people have to add to. It is something that's already there and data waiting for people to review. As mentioned, we've had some successes with our sustainability strategy as it was, which has now become our green plan. Overall, we've managed to reduce carbon related to our energy. As I say, we'll go into some depth. Travel and transport play an important part of the overall carbon footprint. We've gone to full EV only pool cars. These are used predominantly by our OT team. We've had some feedback on it, some things that work, some things that don't, and we're now working towards the strategy that NHSE is adopting to ensure that all pool cars are green in the next few years. So I think 2026, 2027, it is a requirement that all pool cars used by a trust are EV only, with ambulances coming on board later. We also have 8 on-site EV charging points. Those are available to staff and visitors. We also have worked on waste segregation, acknowledging the processes that go into actually processing that waste when it leaves site, and therefore the carbon impact it has after it's left the site. And we are looking forward in our new builds by ensuring that we're not including carbon producing items such as piped nitrous, which it's been agreed will not be implemented in any of our new theatres going forward. So focusing on energy and our big success that I think is easy to talk about. Back in 2018, we were funded 1.2 million through SWLEOC funding for a number of initiatives that directly reduced the carbon footprint of this trust. The requirement of SWLEOC funding was that whatever we did had to pay itself off within 5 years, and we were able, therefore, to put a mix of items in, some going slightly over the 5 years, paid back by those items that were coming in under the 5 years. So the examples we've got here down the right-hand side show that LED lighting had a massive impact. Occupancy sensors and insulation were fairly cheap processes that also had significant impacts and very short payback times, allowing us to invest in solar, which has a slightly longer payback time, but has many other benefits, and an item which is known as auto flame, which is like turbocharging your heating system, which then impacts, all the heating and all the steam that's used throughout the site. The overall impact of this was 1,000 tonnes reduction from our overall footprint when considering a 6,600 tonne overall footprint. It has had a significant impact. That was phase 1 of what is a 4-phase approach to our green plan. We've got local boilers on site. We've got steam generating gas-powered boilers on site, and we've got what's known as a combined heat and power unit on site. All of them are powered by gas, and therefore represent a significant barrier to us reducing our carbon footprint. Difficulty, as highlighted at the bottom of this, is the costs associated with it. Electric is 27p a kilowatt hour. Gas is just under 6p a kilowatt hour. So anything that we do to move away from gas and toward electric is going to significantly financially impact us on a revenue basis. So with our plans, we've had to consider not only what we're going to do to come away from carbon fuel sources, but what we're going to do to balance that with revenue reductions on on-site generation. So say that raises the challenge of, say, gas being cheaper per kilowatt hour, and therefore making it difficult to rationalise financially the move away from gas. But also, say, it's then the monies to invest into the capital schemes that we're looking at, which will see us move away from the plant that's just been mentioned. There are public monies out there, and a lot of you will see emails going around saying money available for capital investment in carbon reducing items. That money comes with its ties of the trust being able to demonstrate that it's got a solid case, so that if we were offered that money, we would be able to deliver the carbon outputs or the carbon reduction outputs that we're describing. And in so doing, there's quite a bit of money required to actually be in a position to get that bid together. So the trust puts itself at risk when it invests in feasibility studies for a public sector decarbonisation scheme fund, which is heavily oversubscribed and therefore doesn't end up paying out on all the schemes that are applied for. Giving that some context on our site, to say we have steam boilers here which go into powering the sterilising equipment in our theatres, in our TSSU departments, and into the heating around site. And CHPs, for those who aren't familiar with them, they are effectively alternators. They use gas power to generate electricity, and whilst they're burning the gas to generate electricity, they are creating heat, efficient to the point that when they're not running, we use the same amount of gas to run our steam boiler, generating no electricity. So the motivation to keep these items to, say, generate energy as cheaply as possible is high, and therefore we have to have very solid cases to move away from them. What I know is of quite a bit of interest is the costs involved with moving away. As a trust, we are, I think, just over £100 million as a turnover. So when we look at these 4 phases that we've still got yet to come, we're aware that we can get funding if we successfully bid for PSDS funding to the value of just over 23 million, of which half will go towards the items that we're looking to purchase. Half goes towards actually investing in on-site generation, which means that we're not actually costing the trust any more in energy. So when it says remaining funding for energy efficient measures, this will predominantly be solar on-site, reducing the cost of the electricity that we would otherwise have to purchase from the grid by replacing our gas. There's further cost involved in ensuring that we can actually get this energy around the site. So that's where we are with energy to date and where we are with our challenges. I'll let Sean go on to talk about other schemes that we're looking at, and then we'll both look together at opportunities ahead.
Thanks, Phil. So we did want to take the opportunity to share one of our more recent achievements, and that relates to waste segregation. So the Trust historically has worked hard to ensure that appropriate waste streams are well utilised across our wards and across our outpatient departments. But following the review of HTM, the waste guidance, and the publication of the clinical waste strategy earlier this year, we challenged our theatre teams to move to implementing infectious waste, or orange bag waste, if you're more used to seeing it that way, for patients with a known infection, rather than applying infectious waste across the board. For the Trust, this has been a real success of collaborative engagement, I think is how we would badge it. The clinical leads in theatre were fully engaged in understanding what the guidance meant, understanding the environmental and the cost benefits associated with appropriate waste segregation, and the operational impact and what that would mean for their teams. The theatre team really led on this and challenged themselves to implement the changes wholesale on the 1st of September. This isn't something that we expected. We thought that there would need to be a more softly approach, but they were keen to approach it from a big bang perspective and make that move. And as you can see on screen, the impact was rapid, it was significant, and we've had really positive feedback from the theatre team on how it's been rolled out, how it's been accepted. And I think for us, it's really prompted some further conversations around, okay, what's next for waste segregation within theatre? Could we increase recycling in this area, for example? So for us, it's a bit of a starting point and something that we'd like to see roll on. Now we've got that close collaboration with our clinical teams, we'd like to hold on with it to it. Next slide, Phil. Staying with the theme of engagement then, there are some pieces of learning that we were keen to take this opportunity to share. Our sustainability working group was initially driven by the Trust's own Green Plan, and more recently that's evolved to better capture some of the national and the regional ambitions that have been published subsequent to our Green Plan being drafted. NHSE's Green Plan support tool, as we've previously mentioned, has been really critical to some of these improvements. It's allowed us to better recognise the successful work that has been made by other staff groups outside of the Estates and Facilities team, where sustainability sits at the Robert Jones. We've noted that whilst the story that you can see on screen tells one of change over the last few quarters, for example, in many cases this work has been happening historically for some time, but we haven't always captured the achievements. So the Green Plan support tool has really enabled us to capture, measure and shout about those great things that have been happening out on the shop floor. So looking ahead to our revised Green Plan, if we come to the end of 2023, early into 2024, we'll be looking to start again and start that next chapter. We're looking to this tool to be critical to ensuring our actions both align to the national programmes and to the regional ambitions, but they also provide us with measurable outcomes, something that we can demonstrate improvements in a simple and easy way for other people outside of the sustainability arena to understand. It's about telling someone something in a language that means something to them, not necessarily means something to us. If we want to go into the last slide, Phil. So we wanted to close up with some next steps or some ambitions and a few pieces of food for thought, I suppose, from the Robert Jones perspective. Whilst we've taken great steps to ensure waste segregation is adhered to across the site, as already mentioned, if we think about the waste hierarchy, we'd rather avoid needing to dispose of such volume of items to begin with. So thinking about single-use plastic in a clinical setting, we'd like to draw on some of the successful initiatives from our non-clinical departments, for example, in catering with disposable cups that were removed earlier this year. We found that identifying a specific high-volume item to focus on, rather than looking at the broader single-use agenda, and exploring the alternatives for that specific item through engagement with the multidisciplinary team, through engagement with the users, provides a much more successful outcome when trying to make a wholesale change. We'd also like to look at expanding the use of Attend Anywhere for virtual appointments to encourage a reduction in road travel to and from our site. We're also working on a programme with our clinical partners to cap off the existing piped nitrous oxide facilities. As Phil mentioned, whilst we've not included it in our new theatre builds, there is still some in our existing estate, and so that's something that we'd like to now go back and remove where possible.
Yeah, so acknowledging that, say, there's plenty out there to go at, and that the funding may not come as we hope. We are exploring further options on things like solar carports, where there are options to purchase, but if you can't purchase, power purchase arrangements where items will be put on site at no cost, and we will purchase the power at a significantly reduced rate, saving the trust and reducing carbon. Alongside that, we're also looking at innovations. There's significant research going on in chemicals that can be put in water to change the property that allow more efficient heating. And there's an interesting opportunity with a project called Infinite Power, who we're working with to see if we can be one of the first trusts to support their green energy proposal at this site. So that covers our opportunities. What I say, something we would acknowledge is that our green strategy is supported by our board. We have an exec level representative, and we've been asked to present updates to them regularly, and the green plan, they have asked for it to be presented at board, so they are fully on board with what we're aiming to achieve and supporting us in achieving it. That's our presentation. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Sean and Phil. That was excellent again. And it's interesting to see it's quite two different approaches from the two hospitals, which I thought was interesting. And maybe I'm going to ask at the end, what have you learned from each other? So we'll talk about that in the discussion. So we go straight on to Virginia. Thanks for joining us, Virginia. And you might tell us what's happening in terms of research and introduce the Dragon Project. Thank you.
Yes, so thank you so much for inviting me today, and I'm delighted to represent my team at the NIHR Global Surgery Unit at the University of Birmingham, and to talk to you today about the Dragon trial, which we are looking to launch in the coming weeks. The Dragon trial looks at the use of disposable versus reusable drapes and gowns in order to, help theatres becoming more environmentally sustainable. But why did we focus on drapes and gowns? Well, we know that both are used globally. So hospitals globally use either disposable or reusable. There is no robust evidence to guide a choice between disposable or reusable. So the WHO does not recommend one or the other, and there is no strong evidence to say that infection is reduced with one or the other. Certainly, we know that disposable gowns have become more popular, especially during during and after the COVID pandemic, as we think they're associated with a lower SSI rate, but certainly we think that these are also associated with a higher financial and carbon cost. So that's a bit about the background. So the objective of the Dragon trial will be to determine whether there is an actual difference in SSI rate occurring within 30 days from an operation in patients in which reusable or disposable drapes and gowns have been used. So we aim to identify really the safest, most sustainable and cost-effective option. And we will report in the main paper, so the first paper out of the trial will be reporting on clinical cost and carbon outcomes, which is really a world's first, because of course there have been papers published in a second moment about cost effectiveness, but not all on the same. So this is what we're proposing today, and it's very exciting. But how are we going to do it? So we're aiming to run a multi-center, non-inferiority cluster randomized trial, which means that basically the hospitals are going to represent clusters, and they're going to be the ones randomized rather than the individual patient. We're aiming to involve about 26,800 patients globally, both adults and children, who have had a clean contaminated and contaminated or dirty surgery with an incision of 5 or more centimeters. We aim to involve 134 hospitals or clusters that would have to recruit 200 consecutive patients. And the clusters are going to be randomized to either an intervention, the reusable drapes and gowns, or a comparator, the disposable drapes and gowns. We're going to report the primary outcome as the SSI rate as per CDC criteria at 30 days within the operation date. And the key secondary outcomes, which, as I said, are going to be reported all in the same paper, initial paper, are going to be cost and carbon. So this is really exciting for us, and it's probably going to be one of the major trials the unit has launched. But the question that, and what I want to mention is, how are we going to calculate that carbon impact of the intervention? So the carbon impact, current methodologies involve, for example, life cycle assessment that probably most of you have heard about, And these are very detailed studies looking at the carbon footprint of each single resource, but they can take up like years to be completed. And these are not really fit for purpose, because if we're doing a trial, we want to know what the carbon impact is in a reasonable time, not 3-5 years after the trial has been completed. So the carbon impact we are aiming to calculate with a new methodology, which is going to be pragmatic, fast, and innovative, which we're calling the carbon model. And I'm just going to take a couple of slides just to explain a little bit more about the carbon model and how we're kind of developing this, because it's work in progress at the moment, and it's certainly very exciting. And then in the end, I'm going to tell you how you can get involved. So the purpose of the methodology is going to be based on a previous trial that the unit has run that was published in The Lancet last year, and it's the CHEETAH trial. The CHEETAH trial was a pragmatic cluster randomized trial running in 7 low-income and middle-income countries. That trial looked to find out whether a routine change of gloves and instruments before closing the abdominal wound in abdominal operations will lead to a reduction in surgical site infection. And as a matter of fact, it did lead to a robust reduction of 13% when compared to routine practice, which is great, because the burden of surgical site infection, especially in low middle income countries, is huge. So this is a great finding. However, arguably, some of the comments have been in looking at the theme of sustainability that is developing in the operating theatre, that you're using more gloves, you're using more instruments, so that's not very.
The whole thing is you saw some of it, Ruth saw a lot of it, but there was only about half.
We just want to find out, you're using more gloves, you're using more instruments. So what is the carbon footprint? You're using more resources. So arguably, this is going to have a greater impact. And that's what we're trying to find out. So we're going to use the CHEETAH trial data to build this model and use supplementing data from other parameters that are estimated through other sources. So, for example, current literature, but also through a series of webinars that we've been running. And basically, we want to find out whether the carbon footprint of the glove change and the instrument change is greater of the carbon footprint of the SSIs that we prevented. So what is the wound-specific carbon footprint? And that's what we're doing at the moment. To calculate the carbon footprint of an SSI, this is quite a complex process because it's never been done before. But we're basically looking at the resources that are used to manage a patient with a surgical site infection. And we know that what is used is wound swabs, imaging, wound dressings, antibiotics, additional length of stay, reattendance, readmission, and reoperation. So we used the CHEETAH data to find kind of additional resource use, but we haven't stopped there. And we're running a series of webinars. We had one on Monday for the UK as well, to find out what the resource usage is in different kind of settings, to add some specificity and granularity to our model. All of this is to explain to you that this is going to form our new methodology that is going to represent a pre-trial model. And once the methodology is defined, what we're going to use is that we're going to adapt that to the Dragon trial. And this is going to be how we're going to calculate the carbon impact of the intervention in Dragon, which is very exciting. So if you are interested in taking part in the Dragon trial, you can scan the QR code or go to the link and fill in a form. This does not commit you in any way. It's just to kind of put your center on our map. And of course, we would have to go through some questions and check whether it would be feasible to have the trial run within your center. But by all means, we're going to put the link in the chat as well. And also, which is very exciting, we're having our Research for Greener Surgery conference in a couple of weeks' time now. It's on the 13th of December at the University of Birmingham. We have actually sold out, and there has been a great response. We sold out about 350 tickets for in-person attendance, which is fantastic. but we are given the opportunity for a hybrid option to participate in 2 of the key sessions. So how can we generate evidence to influence policy, and the launch of the Dragon Trial, where you're going to find out a bit more information about the Dragon Trial. So if you're keen to take part on that, please disseminate among your colleagues. Then you can go to the link, scan the QR code, and again, I'll put that in the chat. And again, another opportunity that the unit is looking at is changing what we do in anesthesia, and to kind of gauge what anaesthetists think about sustainability in their field. We're running a webinar tomorrow at 7:30 p.m. and I'm going to add a link to the chat for that as well. And it would be great if you could register. And of course, anaesthetists, it's really for anaesthetists, but anyone is welcome. And we're going to discuss really the anesthesia, sustainable anesthesia interventions. So that's all for me. So thank you very much, and looking forward for the discussion next.
That's great, Lida. Thanks for that. So lots of stuff to talk about. Go to the questions, and I'll say to Phil and Sean, have you learned anything from the SWLEOC presentation?
Yeah, I'd say yes. I mean, we've seen the R's approach, but not quite as many R's as were included in that presentation, and it gives you pause for thought as to different processes that can be considered as to, maximising sustainability opportunities. Also, I think it's the willingness to engage in sustainable thinking. I think in isolation, people work in their own sphere and don't realise what level of interest there is in other departments. And with a bit of peripheral knowledge from each department being brought together, I think there'd be quite a bit of learning amongst teams. And I think probably it's about finding that little bit of time. I know time is precious for all of us these days. Finding that bit of time to get together and say, we can help you. I'm sure you can help us achieve our collective goal.
Thanks for that. Yeah, because I think we are a group of basically orthopedic factories. We're actually doing the same sort of thing. We're producing the same bags of waste. We're very similar, so we might have similar challenges ahead of us in terms of sustainability and a green plan. So you're absolutely right, and we will probably at the NOA go there again to try and share and see what's happening at other NOA hospitals. So we may actually come together and have a morning's conference about this. I think there's some hidden benefits from the pandemic. There's a huge number of meetings we used to get into our car to drive to regionally, which we don't do anymore. So there are some benefits from the pandemic that we don't quite that we forget about. I go through some of the questions now. I'll start at the top. This one obviously is Virginia. A trust gets involved. Any cash? Can you throw some cash at us for getting involved in these projects? How does it work?
No, I think we're not planning to. I think what we can discuss is the provision of the drapes and gowns. For example, if your hospital is purely reusable, then we could provide disposable. But that again will have to be discussed. But by all means, do still fill the expression of interest form, and it's something that we can discuss at a later stage. Of course, if the hospital uses disposable only, which I feel like is more likely scenario in orthopedics trusts,
Yes.
It's a little bit more complicated because, of course, then there might be a situation in which the sterilization service has been kind of scaled down or removed altogether, and therefore it would be challenging to reintroduce that within, just for the trial. And within, a timely fashion to apply. But, we're definitely happy to discuss how we can kind of get you involved. And by all means, if you fill in the expression of interest, then we'll be in touch with you just to figure out whether it's feasible to get you involved.
I think we should try and do that. Do you think we'd be able to cope on Oswald Street with reusable gowns? Who sterilizes them? What do we do with them? Who cleans them? Just very briefly, Phil, Sean?
So we do have the opportunity through our linen contractor to launder gowns to the appropriate standard. So the opportunity for us to use certainly the gowns, the infrastructure is there. I think what would be key for us is having almost a clinical face, to drive it forward. I think that would be a key to the success of getting that some form of trial over the line.
Well, hopefully there's a clinical face joining us and might be willing to step up to the mark and drive this. I think it would be useful. Okay. Second question, the RGH team, can you explain what SWLEOC is funding? What's SWLEOC funding? What's that all stand for, Phil?
SWLEOC funding is government funding, which initially was funding based on feedback, and I think now going forward it's more commonly the public sector decarbonisation scheme, so PSDS is grant funding. We get emails out quite frequently about, two opportunities. The first is money to create your business case, and the second is money for business cases that have that opportunity to generate significant carbon improvements. If you don't get the first, you'd be very hard pushed to get into the second, because you need to have that business case that demonstrates that you're definitely going to deliver the carbon saving and the improvement. So the first proposition is one that has to be watertight. Thank you.
It's actually a comment from Alex Yashkik, who's one of our nieces in Oswestry. Although gas is cheaper than all, the energy market could change quickly without any substantial investment in electricity, PV and wind turbine. This balance model is sadly doomed. We must ditch hydrocarbons. Yeah, I think we all agree with that one. Next one, regarding tourniquets, some trusts have changed to this. Where's it gone? Regarding tourniquets, some trusts have to change to disposable ones because of infection control issues, because it's very difficult to clean a reusable tourniquet. So that came up, I think, was it in Irrum's presentation, tourniquets? Yes, Irrum.
Yes.
Yeah,
so
cleaning reusable tourniquets.
So it was so we have changed to a reusable tourniquets for some procedures, and it was just making sure that we are. So Professor Kader, he led on this, he educated and the team members, went through infection control, made sure that everybody was aware before the change was made.
Yeah, because one of the issues is we've gone to disposable a lot of stuff based on infection control issues.
Yeah,
you need those on board in a big way, Virginia, and we need to know what infection control thinks of all of this, because I think they're going to be our biggest resistance.
So they were one of our biggest resistance to start off with, but we got them engaged and involved, and we asked them to come to our meetings. And when we got them involved, it's just sort of giving. I think one of the things we learned was empowering people, was helping and asking them for their opinions, understanding for them why there was resistance, and working with them. And that's how we managed to overcome our obstacles. But like other trusts, I'm sure that infection control was an obstacle, but we have overcome it.
Okay, we just noticed quite a different approach between SWLEOC and Oswestry in terms of priorities for sustainability. Have you learned anything from Oswestry? Have you said, well, never thought of that?
Yes, so there are a few things, and I mean we took back some stuff from when they previously presented at the NOA conferences as well. But there is a difference in approach, and I think we have learned from them. And it's really helpful, and we may get in touch with you actually, if we can, just to see how we can further our sustainability aims, because we've sort of kept it very much in theatre, but whether we can sort of expand it out a bit more and just get on board with you guys.
Phil, can I just ask you, the solar panels on top of the pool and elsewhere, what difference has that made? Have we calculated the difference that's made to our energy usage? Have we saved money, or what's happening with that? Has that been looked at and audited?
Yes, there's been significant financial saving and reducing pressure off the grid. I'll get some figures up when you ask your next question and maybe put it in the chat as to exactly how much we've saved. But it has made a significant contribution. I think batteries will be the next thing that we have to consider because, as I say, gas is heavily used over winter and electricity heavily used over summer. The air conditioning has put an awful lot of pressure on electric, so the solar on site has done an awful lot to assist that. But I think there's a big exercise to reduce the dependence on gas heating over winter, especially when you haven't got as much solar opportunity to gain from.
Yeah, and Sean, sort of, you hinted at this. We're building new theatres at the moment. So what does a new brand new smacking sustainable theatre look like? You did mention that we've stopped the anaesthetist using nitrous oxide, but you can do that in a standard theatre as well. And I think that is basically, I think they've moved from nitrous oxide to other gases. But what else in our new sustainable theatres? What else is in there?
So from an estates perspective, I think insulation plays a big part in to reduce the loss of energy, and I think it's about getting it right first time as well. Putting the right waste routes in, ensuring that you're not introducing things that create the waste or create waste gases in that first instance. Sean, you've got any other thoughts on that?
No, I think away from the sort of practicalities of the physical new theatres that we're building, we're at quite an exciting time from a Robert Jones point of view in terms of developing our relationships with that theatre team across the sustainability agenda. So I think as we capitalise on the successes of things like the improved waste streams and working with them to develop the new theatres, that further opportunities will arise, because I really think critical is that you have those collaborative relationships and you have those conversations, and creating a culture where there is no silly question to ask, can we try, is kind of the culture we want to get to, where someone feels confident to ask, could we try?
And is there solar panels on the roof of this building?
Not on the roof of that building. It doesn't create the best environment for it, but we've got other places on site that we know are optimized for that. And so while we've been speaking, just determined about 15% of our power, electrical power, does come from solar right now. There were two phases. What you saw on the SWLEOC investment, we've subsequently used capital investment for further expansion, and so we know there's ideal roofs on site for further expansion, and then it'll be down to carports, which, as a site which has got quite a bit of land, there's quite a bit of opportunity for us to exploit it that way.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to close things down now, but just a few things to say. Claire, can you switch back to my presentation, just my last couple of slides? My thank you slide. No, it's been very informative and interesting, and it is hard to keep up the pressure, and the finances have to be in place. Ironically, we are paid to do orthopedic surgery. So if we reduce the amount of orthopedic surgery we do because of payment by results, we're reducing our income. So we suffer. So there's some conflicting arguments around sustainability and the Green Plan for every trust. But can I thank all the speakers? It was very informative today. I wish Virginia success with her research, and I hope we might think about getting involved. Hope somebody's listening there that might get us involved in Ulster Street. What do I need to say? We have a survey on chat, please, that's been posted on chat by Claire. If you could complete that survey at the end, I think it's on chat. Things we're thinking about doing next year, we're going to talk about orthopedic consent, whether electronic consent helps or not. Physician assistance has become a bit of a, shall I say, hot topic in orthopedic surgery over the last year. And then also the introduction of first contact practitioners for MSK pathways. We're going to look at that as probably a topic for the newer year as well. So please stay involved. Please write to us, engage with us. on this topic, but any other topics that you feel influences the national orthopedic picture around the country, which is, as we all know, very difficult at the moment. So on that note, I'm just going to thank everybody for joining us, and we'll see you at the next webinar. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye now.